Really, it's lovely to see familiar faces. We're getting into a bit more of a groove with our moving chat series now, hitting number 12. And so there are some familiar faces and some new faces, so welcome to everyone. Just very briefly, this is Moving Fearlessly is a collaboration between Fearless Communicators, and Deb represents Fearless Communicators from the US, and Moving Communication, which is my company name. And we've collaborated after Fearless Communicators, well, like after the world was hit by COVID and everything went online. The series of public speaking training Fearless Communicators was doing here in Australia called Fearless Force, and many faces I see here have gone through that program when once upon a time we could meet in a room. Everything's come online, and we wanted to reach into this wonderful network of women mostly and share our expertise and knowledge and wisdom as a way to move through this turbulent time. So I invited Deb and I didn't invite just Deb, but I said, let's collaborate, let's bring these chats down under. And here we are down under. And we're up to chat number 12. So, and I'll introduce Deb in a minute, who's going to, of course, take us through a process and explore collective grief. So before I do, I just realized I haven't done an acknowledgement of country, which I'd like to do before we get going. So yes, someone's written it out, and to be honest, I don't know about you, I'm a bit bumbly sometimes around. So I'm going to read out what someone shared. Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm here on Gadigal land in Sydney, and our traditional custodians of the land. I want to recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and that sovereignty was never given to the colonisers coming into this land. So if you'd like to share briefly in the chat, which land are you sitting, standing, or in Sitara's case, lying upon this morning? What is the country that you would like to acknowledge? Fantastic, wonderful, great to see. Lenape, Canada, wow. Gadigal as well, yep.
The Turrbal.
Who said that? The
Turrbal people.
Ah, thank you, thank you. Pronunciation sometimes. Sorry, who was that? Go for it.
The north side of Brisbane.
Ah, okay, wonderful.
Where your mum is, Deb.
Ah, the connections.
Fine.
And just to briefly too, just to say something about a little more about Fearless Communicators, because as I said, it's a US-based company. Fearless Communicators wants to acknowledge very fully that we operate on Indigenous land as well. And in fact, having collaborated with Australia, has integrated an acknowledgement of country, which is unusual in the US. They also would like to honour ancestors and elders, past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge the existence and prevalence of institutional racism, misogyny, ableism, ageism and LGBTQ plus phobia. So we use our diverse bodies, voices and stories in service of dismantling of those systems to ensure equity, justice and freedom for all. And if that resonates for you, feel free to give a little sparkle as well. Yeah, great, wonderful. So before we launch in, as I said, I'm going to introduce Deb in a moment. We'll do a moment of coming together and getting a bit more present with this interface that we're all now meeting on, the square boxes, the computer. And take a moment to lean in and see others on the screen. Let's see each other's faces. I find the most beautiful thing about Zoom is that we start to go into people's houses and all those professional, personal boundaries are starting to merge, and take in who's here, who's meeting here this morning. Hi, Diana. On this Wednesday morning, well, it's Wednesday in Sydney, and if you're coming in from somewhere else, it's the day before probably if you're in the US. And as you look at people, just notice your eyes, how they feel sitting in your face, held securely, and let a gentle softening around your eyes start to emerge, engage if there is any tension. And let your vision move from any focus to a wider, the peripheral vision, and start to take in the computer and anything around you. And then as you sit here, turn your eyes inward and look behind you. And then start to feel into the space that you're sitting within. And you can either choose to continue that softening and that inward movement for a moment. And we'll take a couple of deeper breaths. And feel our bodies in our chairs and on our lounges and beds. And then come back out toward this meeting, staying with that softer peripheral vision. Wonderful. So it's my absolute pleasure to be hosting this chat series with Deb Driscoll. And Deb and I have known each other for, I'm not counting anymore, but for many, many, many years. And it's through a common love of a theatre form, playback theatre. Many of you, maybe you know, maybe you don't, a wonderful form of theatre that we've been practicing for many years. And we've collaborated on a great many projects over the years, doing theatre at festivals and look, all sorts of places. And and then Deb moved to New York City 7, 8 years ago now. And then I was lucky enough to go over there for my work, and we continued to collaborate and enjoy each other's company fully. And over the years, Deb's moved into this expertise and deep engagement with grief, and has just written a book, which is just huge. People managing to get through that process is certainly, let's celebrate that. So thank you, Deb, and really look forward to hearing and you guiding us with your expertise, I think I said your hand and your heart through this process this morning. So welcome.
Thank you, Yo. Always a pleasure. Hello, everybody. Hello. So today, this morning for you, or maybe this evening if you're in North America, somewhere, we're going to be able to just spend some time sitting with grief, and sitting with, in particular today, collective grief. And so I just wanted to start with placing myself in this landscape, because some of you may know me through the Moving Fearlessly chats, and some of you maybe are seeing me for the first time. So I just wanted to share a little bit about how I come to this place of being a grief guide. Among other things I do in the world, I've found myself in this new role over the last handful of years as a grief guide. And trust me, this was never on my when I grow up I want to be list. and it was never on a vision board as I was imagining my career trajectory. It is absolutely a role that has come to find me. And there's a very clear moment when I think it dropped in. I'm sitting crumpled, collapsed on my kitchen floor in a suburb north of Brisbane. And I was completely a mess. I was just collapsed and a mess on my kitchen floor. And I breathed into the knowing that death comes bearing gifts. And now I knew that as like an idea, but I really breathed into that idea that death comes bearing gifts in this moment, because the collapse that had brought me to the floor was the shock waving through my blood and my bones, and the impact of the grief that was coming to meet me. For 3 days prior to this moment, my son Sage Joseph had unexpectedly died. He was 10, he was healthy, there was no warning. And so I found myself in this moment on the kitchen floor. Death comes bearing gifts. What? Where is the gift in this, I thought. And I reflected on when death and grief had come to visit me before. I remembered the first death of my best friend, the first man I ever fell in love with, Nick, when he killed himself when I was 20. And it was tragic, and I don't remember any gifts. When I was 21, my father unexpectedly died of a heart attack, and I do not remember my family opening any gifts. All I remember was the pain and the sustained grief. And I remember the loss of not knowing what to do, and also nobody around me really knew what to do. But in that moment on the kitchen floor, what I became curious in is the fact that I never looked for them. I never looked for any gifts. I just assumed that they weren't there. And so in that moment, I thought, if there is a gift in this, surely I'm better served by trying to find it. And so that's what got me off the kitchen floor, is this pursuit in wanting to find what is possible if we are actually with and be with grief process. What is possible if we allow rather than push away. And over the years before Sage's death, I had been studying different healing practices, different spiritual practice, and I knew more than I knew when I was 20 and 21. So I thought, well, I have more to apply to this process. And so I did. I went on a big journey that lasted for years, took me to different parts of the world, and I did find some gifts. I also found some moments when I fell off the trail. I found some moments when I was probably drinking too much wine. I found some moments when I had some great inspiration. There's so many moments in that, but I actually did find ways that I could not only be with my grief, but make friends with her and allow her in so that she could work with me on the expansion of my heart and my soul experience, which is what brought me to the writing of the book, which is what brought me to people asking if I could sit with them in their grief, and then suddenly, oh, okay, now I'm a grief guide. Here we are. Then there's another moment that's, quite strong in my memory, and it's more recent. I'm sitting in my Brooklyn apartment. It's late March, and I could sense it outside the walls of my apartment. I could almost see and smell the wave of grief that was coming. The world was shutting down. People were in shock. No one knew what was going to happen in the long effects of COVID, particularly in the United States. We were watching the numbers of people dying rising. And I could see it almost like a wave, like a tsunami wave coming. I thought, oh, it's coming and it's going to crash. But what I realized in that moment was I have a strong grief muscle. I've been working this muscle for 7 years now. And so this is when I can be called to service. And so again, another layer of my work as a grief guide came and found me. And I started offering different offerings online and creating new programs, and a lot of people turned up because suddenly everybody needed space to be with the grief and needed the education. How do we do this? Because with our culture, with our, not necessarily all cultures, I definitely won't say that, but with a lot of the cultures that we hang out in, a lot of the way our communities operate, is grief is allowed in moments. And that's it. We don't have a lot of common language around it. And outside of religious practices, there's not a lot of ritual around it. So a lot of my work is not only in being with people as they are grieving, but teaching grief processes and practices. So what I want to do today is actually do that, hold space for collective grief, but also give you a little something, give you a few things that I've figured out and learned along the way so that you can take them not only for yourself, but back into your families and your communities so that we can find a way to be with the waves of grief that are very present.
Wow, I'm really feeling your story and connection to this topic. Yeah. And it is deep, isn't it? It's grief sits deeply in our body, in our soul. That's what I'm really with at the moment. Thanks so much for sharing, Deb, your story. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and trust me, Sage is with us now. He's with me every time I do this work.
Exactly.
The spirit of Sage is turning up right now. We work together.
Yes. Exactly.
I just want to invite people as we kind of work through this session, if you have your own response or you have a question or whatever the case may be, add it into the chat, or if it's appropriate, just kind of alert to Yo or I. If there's, you want to unmute yourself in a moment and share something, like definitely wanting it to have a sense of us being together in a community. And I have things and tools that I want to share with you, but I'm also interested in maybe you have something to add, or maybe there's something that you need to express in this moment too. So feel free to, some people are more comfortable to write it in a chat. Some people just, you might want to say, and let me just spend a moment. So, please be with us, and we'll try our hardest to be conscious of that. Yo's probably going to do a better job than me in this moment, just because I'm conscious of wanting to take you through a process. So I'll tell you what, today I want to talk about collective grief and the difference between when we talk about grief and collective grief. So I just want to kind of give a little frame around that. But then what I've done for us all today is I've identified Deb D's top 3 myths about grief. And I have met those 3 myths with a medicine. So we're going to go myth and medicine. And the medicine is essentially the tools, the way that you can work with and be with. And then after a little bit of play with myth and medicine, there's a particular meditation that I have designed that I work with people, particular groups of people, which is about diving underneath the wave of the grief. So I want to spend time in the visualization, creative visualization and meditation with you towards the end. So,
beautiful.
Collective grief.
Begin.
Collective grief. So, grief, we know, is the human natural response to the fact that something we love, we've lost. Right? And grief is not only natural, it's also inevitable. For all of us, having the human experience means at some point we will have an experience of grief. And for some people, that experience may be sustained, it may be repeated, it may be complicated. Like, there's so many different ways that grief arrives. I believe grief has as many faces as we do. Grief is a completely personal and independent of anybody else's experience. And so when I work with people, I'm like, you are guiding me also in how grief is turning up for you. So for some people, they're going to feel it really strongly in their bodies. For some people, it's going to be more of a disturbance of their thought patterns. For some people, it's just a deep ache in the heart space. For some people, it actually affects their spiritual realm and their spiritual connection. For some people, all of those. And
is this a good...
Yes, sorry, go, Yo.
I was just wondering whether it's a good time to hear from people with grief, how you respond. Do you know how you respond? Is it any of those things, or is there something other?
Yeah. And I think maybe the question would also be specifically, how's grief turning up for you now?
Yes.
Because right now is a particular grief experience. And so
Yes.
if you have an awareness of how grief is turning up for you now, if you want to add that into the chat, that would be great.
Let's start hearing. And I wanted to share, Mandy had responded to your story and thanking you for your deep share. She touched it. She has a 14-year-old son, and it went straight to her heart, as I'm sure many mothers must respond. Thanks, Mandy.
Yes.
And Bridget said, sitting closely under the surface, the grief. Yep.
Yeah. Now the thing about the grief that's being experienced now, I mean, I'm just going to keep talking to keep the train moving, but absolutely keep adding into the chat. So sitting with grief and honouring rituals and routines. Thank you, Linda. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about. So an aspect of grief, something that we know eases grief, is touch, connection, community, and ritual. Now you add COVID to that, and we're asked to be socially distanced and shelter in place. So we can touch only the people who are in our shelter in place spot. So we don't have an expansion of being able to connect and hug all the people that we love, all the people who might be able to help us ease. So that has been denied us in this moment. Plus also gathering together in large groups and having ritual. We can do that online, which is kind of essentially what we're doing now, but it's also once removed of that being together in space and having that sense of connection and touch. So this is why I felt a really strong call to action when I saw that wave of grief coming, because I was like, oh, we're all sitting in one spot now. And not only is the grief coming, but the grief that's been sitting there in our spirits, in our bodies, it's going to come to the surface now. And so whatever your grief experience is now, just know that it is what it is now, and it's likely to shift and change. And whatever you're experiencing is actually a very human, normal experience. And there's ways that you can be with it. Ways you can be with it so that you can be eased. And when I was reflecting on Australia, I was thinking, you know, the grief in Australia is deeper than what's happening now, because really, for me, I think Australia started the process of what's happening in the Australian community, Australian culture, back in the summer when the fires were ripping through. Because that's where this story really began. That's how 2020 began for Australia. And then it's just kept rolling. And so there has been a sustained community process of loss, destruction, and change. And now we're almost at September, the 9th month. And so that in itself bears a weight. And so for collective grief, what happens with collective grief is sometimes you may not have a personal experience of grief. You may not have had someone directly affected by the fires. You may not have lost your business or your job because of COVID. You may not know someone who has been sick, ill, or died. But it is sitting in the collective energy of the community that you are a part of, or the communities that you're a part of. And so the thing that can be tricky about collective grief is that we can't always necessarily easily identify it, because it's just kind of there. And because we can't necessarily name it, like I could easily name and still can name, I have a continued grief experience because my son Sage Joseph died. When you're sitting in community collective grief, like Australia is sitting in now, or like really like the world is now, but specifically I'm talking about Australia, it's hard sometimes to like grab it and name it, which can mean it's hard to kind of process, but it does sit either in your body, like Bridget said, just under the surface, or it starts floating around in the mind, or it kind of like knocks at the heart. So it's there. So it can be a little bit insidious and tricky to work with, the collective grief.
And Sally's acknowledged our nation is founded on grief and loss of colonization. That's already there and often hard to acknowledge for white Australians especially.
Yeah.
And to be with that.
Yeah. And Paul has added to that with the Black Lives Matter, the stolen land, stolen generations, fire destruction, COVID, big waves. Indeed.
Yeah.
So all the more reason to reach for the medicine. So did you have something there, Yo, that you wanted to add?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think it might be a good moment to just sit with the emotion, because grief is emotional. And I mentioned earlier hearing Deb's story again, and even though I know Deb's story very well, it does, like you say, we are all sitting with the grief of our life. It is part of life. And just to acknowledge the ripples that has when talking about this and stepping into it, which I'm sure, Deb, you must find actually talking about it, I too am realizing the many grieves of my losses in my life, that I do move away from that and distance myself, because it's deep and it is that pull under. So I just want to acknowledge the emotions that I'm feeling, and for anyone else to acknowledge those, and to ask, how are you feeling in response to what has been shared already, where we're starting to dive into on this morning. We've started to share in the chat. And maybe it is, like you say, it's that ritual. What is the ritual to acknowledge that and to enable us to be with that and be with each other with our grief?
I guess, could I say something?
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
Annette, please.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annette.
That's okay. I think it was. I found it quite difficult to sit through this. It's early in the morning, and I'm just thinking, wow, we don't take a lot of time in our lives to sit like this with and talk about grief and talk about what we're doing. So there's for me, a lot of things came up, and I did feel quite vulnerable, and thinking, maybe this is not the right place for me. As you say, that the gifts, it was, yes, it might be a gift, but it just came and sideswiped me, and then it had very edgy wrapping. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of really acknowledge that, like, there is a lot of stuff that we're really holding, and having this opportunity to really kind of acknowledge it is really, it's important, but it's tough. I'm finding it tough, but I really want to sit here with you, and so that's all I want to say. That I'm finding it tough, but I'm here.
Yes.
Thank you, Annette.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
for acknowledging the discomfort of the grief. And it is the discomfort that we then go, oh, let's just shift away from that. And, we can spend our whole lives in a dance with grief and never actually really move into the walls.
Yeah. And I think what you say about it holding what's happening for us now, trying to cope so much and be normal and do things and compensate, has at this moment, all that has been sitting, quite there as we're coping, we're okay. And then it's just all the other stuff is just, once you allow that to kind of acknowledge that, then everything else comes up. So I think, anyway, it's great.
Yeah.
It's good.
And that's the wave. No, you don't have to shut up. I'm completely acknowledging what you're saying. And I think you're speaking for probably quite a few people on this call, but what you've just kind of pointed towards in there is the wave. It's like once it starts coming up, like, oh, there's the wave, here it comes,
Yeah.
And that's where we're getting to with the meditation. It's really delicious.
Yeah, good. All right.
Driving under the wave. Sally.
I just really briefly want to say I find it an immense relief, this meeting, this gathering, this session. As soon as I saw the title of it, I'm going to move heaven and earth to be here this morning. Just something, Deb, of just the relief of naming and acknowledging the grief and even the collective grief. Because I feel like I have grief antenna. I'm often working with people with grief and with my own grief, with art making, etc., and with grief and anxiety and fear. Yeah, just I kind of amazes me in some ways how little it is, how rare it is that it does get named, and it doesn't amaze me because I know how a lot of people are very frightened of it. We're taught to move away from it. Yeah. Just so thank you. Relief of it being brought present.
Yeah. You are welcome. You are all welcome. And you are welcome to be in all of your discomfort and all of your ease and everything that arrives for you. And if you need to at any moment, take yourself off video or get up and move your body or whatever, you do that. You do whatever's going to help you to be and stay present with what's emerging for you. Knowing that Yo and I, we've got you. I just want to take a beat now. Oh yeah, we've got just one more response down in the corner for me there.
Yes.
And then we'll move on to the myths and the medicine. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, it took a while to actually arrive on screen, but we were in the background listening to you deeply. I just want to thank you for just bringing this conversation, because it has always been essential, and it's especially essential at the moment. I want to honor your courage, your journey. I can't start imagining what your journey has been and still is, and yet it is the most essential and deep journey you can take in terms of transformation. So having this courage to actually not only do the journey when many people don't have the courage to do the journey, but also to bring it forward for everyone to see it and to witness the transformation is just absolutely the most precious gift you may be giving to yourself and to everyone. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Debra.
That makes me feel all like warm. Thank you, Iz. Thank you. So thank you all for being here. Let's now shift to Deb's top 3 myths and medicine of grief. And I'll tell you this, I just made this up the other day because I thought, okay, I want to have a new way of, playing with talking about collective grief. So this is where we've arrived. You're the first to hear Deb's top 3 myths and medicine. So myth number 1, people don't want to be reminded of their grief. We're not to talk about it. It's like the war. Don't talk about the war. Don't mention the war. This is a complete myth. Somebody who is having a grief experience is forever reminded of it. It is there and present with them the whole time. People would think that, we can't mention Deb's son. Don't mention Sage, it'll upset her. I was upset all the time. I was just sustaining that all the time. And when someone would bring my name, the name of my son, into space, that is what was my relief. That he could be through the hearts and the spirit of others, and that it was okay then for me to speak about it. So myth number one, let's bust it right now. People don't want to talk about it, don't bring it up. It's the conversation not to have at the dinner party. That's not true. One of the ways that we ease and help and process our grief is by acknowledging it, which you've all acknowledged today by turning up and wanting to be a part of this conversation. So the medicine to this myth. The tricky part about bringing it up is it's awkward and we don't know what to say. How many times can you say, I'm sorry for your loss? Once you've said that, you've said it. So what else do you say? When you say to someone who's grieving, you just tell me anything you need. People in acute grief, they don't know what they need. They're just in it, right? It's a mess. If you're in this collective grief of like, we can't really talk about it, it's kind of like you're in a soup. What do I need? I don't know. Do I need a spoon? I don't know. So this is the medicine. Grief is an experience that we feel. It is strongest in the heart vibration. So what happens when we have an experience of grief is our heart muscles break. So it's similar to like when you're working on a muscle. If you're going to do a workout, the next day your muscle's going to be sore, right? And why your muscle is sore is because those muscle fibers in the process of getting stronger have broken. Then they feel sore because they're broken. Then they get put back together and then they're stronger, right? What grief does is it breaks the fibers of our energetic heart. And for some people, you actually do feel it in your chest, like a sore muscle, right? And the process of grief, of being with our grief, is actually being with the repair of those muscles. And what you get is a stronger heart, because the heart muscle has been worked with and repaired. If we deny working through our grief, we're left with muscles that maybe reattach the threads, or maybe not, or there's a bit of scar tissue there, or whatever the case may be. So the process of grief is around developing our energetic heart muscle. So this is the medicine. Ask people, how is your heart? Ask directly to the core of what is going on for a person in a grief experience. They are feeling it in their heart. They might also have a sore lower back. They might also be frustrated at their partner for like not cleaning the kitchen or whatever. But essentially, it's a heart vibration. So go right there. Yes, it is important to talk about it. It is difficult to know the right thing to say. So my advice to everyone is have the courage to ask the question that matters, which is, how is your heart? And then from there, the person can take that wherever they need it to go. And then you just follow them. You don't have to know what to say. You just have to listen and follow. And just stay tuned to your own heart and what you're feeling in that moment too. So that's myth number one. We're not supposed to talk about it. That is not true. The way that we can talk about it by asking, how is your heart?
Beautiful, Deb. And just wanted to look at the time as well, if we want to get the meditation in, because this is so rich. It's so rich.
Myth number two.
Great.
Myth number two, because we want to get to the meditation. Myth number two is that at some point grief ends and our job is to fix it. To help someone, we're going to fix their grief so they can get to the end of it. That is not true. Grief is a process, and we don't actually get over it, what happens is we integrate the experience into our full human experience. It just becomes a part of us. The healing of that loss becomes a part of our human experience. The thing I like to tell people is grief is both a healing and a creative process. Rather than trying to fix it, look for what eases it. What is going to help you to ease the ouch while you're processing it? So here is your medicine. Identify for yourself what helps me to ease, whether it's grief or frustration or anger or whatever it might be. For me, it was always going to find nature. After my son died, every day I found myself out with the trees or sitting by a river. The other thing that works for me is writing. I'm a writer, I like to write. Whatever it is for you that helps to ease, we're not trying to fix anything. Please don't try to fix anybody else's grief, because that is so not what is needed. Don't try to fix your own grief. Just be with it and ease it. Allow yourself to be in the process. We're all creative beings. Find your creative process, which is also a healing process, and do that. And for the extra bonus of this medicine, you could invite people into that process with you. Maybe you invite people to share a co-working session on Zoom where you all write some stories, or you open up the whiteboard on Zoom and you draw some pictures. We're in collective grief. Invite people into the process. Just say, hey, I'm going to hang out with my grief for a little while and hope that it eases. You want to join me? Do not try to fix, seek to ease. Myth number 3. If I allow the grief, if I actually feel it, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole and I will be lost. I will be in pain and be sad forever. Not true. Grief has an ebb and a flow. We naturally, as humans, are constantly moving back towards balance. We have homeostasis that wants to move us towards balance. Our mind does it, our heart does it, our body does it, all of our hormones, everything does it. So if you actually let go and surrender into the grief, absolutely you'll have that exquisite moment of like, oh, I can't touch the sides anymore and I may not come back. Yes, you will have that. And yeah, it's scary and it feels really intense. The word I describe it is exquisite. Like when you actually just sit with it, it's just like, whoa, it's so intense, but it's actually quite beautiful. But it is the process of allowing, because if we don't actually fully surrender, we don't actually get to the bottom of it to be able to calm and through. If we minimize our grief, if we squash it down, then we also squash down our potential for joy, our potential for processing our anger. Grief is one of your human experiences. If you minimize it, you minimize it all. So the good news is, if you allow, then what you're actually doing is inviting into your life, maybe not in the present moment, but in your future moments, you're allowing more joy, more love, more potential, more possibility. That's one of the gifts of being with your grief. Trust me, I know it. The way my heart is put together now and the way I experience joy now is vastly different than years ago in my life. It's not an easy process. It doesn't ever end. It will never be fixed. But the medicine works. Check in with your heart. Go into creative process. Allow and surrender. I'll just pause there now and just let that sit.
Yep. Let that sit.
Just let that sit.
Take a deep breath Oh, you're going to take us into a meditation in a minute, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether we go straight into that actually and be with what's, you know, thank you for your gift, for the gift of your wisdom, Deb.
Oh, you're
Absolutely.
welcome.
That needs to be said.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go into the meditation now.
Because we're sitting with our grief.
Sitting with it now. We've all identified it. We're with it. So this meditation is inspired by the Australian Sea. So when I was learning how to swim, it became very clear that if you stand and just stare at the big wave coming at you, you will get pummeled and you'll go under the water and you're fighting for breath. It's also clear, I remember this as a little kid, seeing the big wave come, thinking I could outrun it, turning around and running for shore, just get knocked in the back of the head, pummel around. Right? The other thing that I didn't like doing as a kid was being scared of the waves and sitting on the shore. That sucked. I wanted to be in the water having fun with my sisters. And so you learn as a kid, well, I learned as a kid in the Australian Sea, where some of those waves can be big, that what you want to do when you see the big wave coming is you want to dive underneath it and come out the other side. So we're going to work with this metaphor of diving under the wave as we sit with and be with our grief, so that we don't get slammed and grief salt water up the nose, we don't get hit on the back of the head, and we're not left on the shore where it's not fun. So whatever you need to do now to make yourself comfortable, whether you need to kind of shift where you are, you want to try and find a space where, if possible, you can have everything uncrossed knees, ankles, arms. And you're going to have this moment to just be able to be with. I'm just going to take you through a meditation. It's going to be just probably about 5 minutes, so that we have a few minutes after the meditation to be together in the group. But we're all going to go to the beach where the waves are large. And so finding yourself now in that comfortable position, whatever comfort means for you, and allowing your body to hold you as it does. Acknowledging yourself in space in this moment, and acknowledging the space outside of you and the space within you. Allowing the space outside of you to just simply relax and let go as your eyes have closed and your attention and intention draws within. Within you, you have the great expanse of all of your experience that your body holds for you. You have the fullness of your breath. You have the beating of your heart. And you have every memory of yours ever living in your muscle. Being with the fullness of who you are now, and allowing this moment to simply be. Placing our focus on our breath and just noticing that it naturally has an ebb and a flow. You don't need to do anything. Nothing needs to change. The breath comes in and draws energy into the body. And when it's ready, that breath just lets go and allows the release. So to spend now the next couple of minutes just focusing on that ebb and flow of the breath, how it just naturally arrives and naturally leaves. How the breath comes in and the abdomen swells to the fullness of the breath. And how when that breath leaves, there's a different sense of relief and let go. Allowing your breath now to be your anchor in this moment, anchoring you into this present moment, and allowing all thoughts, feelings, and anything else in this moment that you do not wish to sit with you now, to just float away on the out-breath. And drawing in on the in-breath, your strong anchor into this moment. All is safe. You are well. You are present. And you are anchored firmly in your body, your heart, your mind, and your soul. As you sit now on a sandy beach, looking out to the ocean and seeing the waves swell, come towards you, collapse on the shore, and then pull back to the ocean. And you see these waves now as the same ebb and flow as your breath. The rising, the collapsing, and the letting go. Seeing the waves swell, come towards you, collapsing at the shore and letting go. Being with the ebb and the flow. You know that the waves hold all of your feelings. The ocean is holding all of your memories. And it's coming towards you. You choose now to move from the shore into the ocean. All is safe, you are well. And you know that because you are anchored to your breath and you trust yourself in this moment, that you know that you can be with all that rises, all that wishes to collapse. You shift now into the water and it's sitting up around your waist. You can see in the distance the waves beginning to swell and come towards you. You know in this moment you have a choice. You could stand frozen and stare. You could turn and run. Or you could dive. Seeing now a big wave coming towards you, swelling, the highest wave you've seen yet today. And you know that this wave is one of those waves of the feelings that feel overwhelming. You will not be frozen. You will not run. You will dive. Seeing now the wave rise and taking the biggest, deepest breath you've taken all day. And as you let that breath go, you dive under the wave and come out the other side. Being with, not without, not freezing and not running. You know that if you anchor to your breath, you can dive under any wave that comes to you. Take this moment now to take in a breath, to feel into this moment, to trust this dive, and to commit. Next time the wave comes for me, I will not freeze. I will not run. I will take a big, deep breath and I will dive. You are safe, all is well. Anchored to breath, returning to physical body now, returning to the shore, returning to yourself, returning to the fullness of your body and spirit and heart and mind in the room where you are, connected to our community, connected to the screen. And when you're ready, wiggling fingers and toes and arriving back to the screen and back to us. after your big, deep dive. Just allowing that space of just the arriving back can be quite something. And I just wanted to say, as you're all arriving back, one of the things that has absolutely been my medicine in my grief journey has been breath. If in doubt, just breathe. Just stop and take a big, deep breath and know that you can dive. And also, if you find that your breath is shallow, be okay about that too. Reach out, ask for help, or go and lay down, take a nap, write a story, eat some chocolate. Do whatever is going to ease you in that moment. But you are forever anchored in your breath, and your breath is forever with you.
Wow, Deb. Thank you.
Such a shame that we didn't have more time, because that meditation actually goes longer. There's more pieces to it. But that's okay. Thank you for acknowledging that you need to go, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for being here.
Sorry that we are going over just a little bit of time. But Yo and I were conscious of, we didn't want to just have an abrupt end at the end of the meditation, but then these chats always go so long, like they not so long, so quickly. I mean, so Yo, maybe
Jen saying thank you. I think thank you. Mandy needs to leave for work. We are going to finish, and we'll thank you, Mandy. Thanks for being here, and keep breathing deeply. And being with.
Breathe.
That was incredible. Linda says coming up the other side of the wave was fantastic. I agree. It was amazing how it just, everything that I've been feeling through this session just went into that wave and allowed it to be. It was beautiful, powerful, Deb, I found. And I'm aware of the time as well. But Deb, beautiful work, and generous and grounded, and and just drawing on your wisdom of experience, because having been with you through this journey, amazing, following the heart and the light through this at times very dark journey.
Thank you. For everybody, I have a gift. So I'm going to email everybody not only a replay of this, but I'm going to email you a sample copy of part of my book, so you can start to read into the story to see if that interests you with wanting to read more. But the other thing that I did before I left New York City, because for those of you who don't know, I've just moved to Barbados. That's a different story. One of the things I did before I left New York City is I recorded a series of meditations. And there's one that is called The Smiling Heart, which is one of my favorite meditations. So I'm going to also share, when I share the replay and the sample of a series of surrenders, I'll also share with you the audio file of The Smiling Heart. So you have a meditation. It's about 8 minutes long. It's really lovely.
Beautiful.
And so if you are feeling overwhelmed, or grief gets too much, or you're feeling disconnected from what's happening in your heart, you can sit with my voice, and you can remember that Deb said, I'm interested in how your heart is.
Everyone,
any blessings?
Beautiful, Deb. Thank you. The generosity, wisdom, eloquence, absolutely, beauty and love. Incredibly generous, Deb. Incredibly.
Oh, Bernadette. I have to talk to you, Bernadette, about Barbados. Yes.
Beautiful, says Sue. I think we all feel that. It's been really rich, touching, moving, holding. Thank you. So we are going to finish, because I'm looking at the time, and we like to finish by seeing each other. And I think let's stay with this feeling. We don't have to rush from what we're feeling. Let's be with this feeling as we farewell each other into our days, into our lives, with the richness of what Deb's shared with us, and the depth at which you're being with your grief as well. So what we do is we all put up our hand. If you would all put up your hand, and we're going to acknowledge each other and it will look like this, a bit like when we started. I'm going to call out someone and say, I see you, thank you for being here, and they're going to say that to me, and they're going to call out someone else and acknowledge them. So I'll look around, I'll say, Bridget, so pleased you made it and are sitting with us in this conversation. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute.
You're
of
on
course.
mute, darling.
Zoom, classic.
Rewind. Sally, I see you and really appreciate everything you've given, and thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, so much. And Linda, I see you and really value your expressions today and your presence. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. And Annette, I just want you to know that I see you and I heard your grief and you're not alone.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda. Shell, I see you, I acknowledge you, and I thank you for being here today and not giving up, but setting aside some time to be with us and to have your presence here on the screen with us.
Thank you, Annette. Jen, I see you. I value you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Shell. Bernadette, I see you. And thank you. And appreciate your warm and open heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Paula, il y a deux personnes là, je veux voir, et je vous remercie d'être ici. Je ne sais pas si vous parlez français, but I see you, I acknowledge you, and I thank you for being here with us throughout the world, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm here with my partner Iz, who you heard earlier, who speaks French. Donc bonjour à toi. And Bernadette, I see you and I honor you, and I honor all of the color that I see in you and around you on your screen. And may you continue to bring color forth. Deep bonding.
So Bernadette, you got it twice, and you can now share with someone else and see someone else.
Satara, I see you. I love your hair. I acknowledge you, and I thank you for being here.
You're on a phone, Satara, so it may be difficult to see, but there's Diana and Deb. Oh.
Just going to ask her. I think she's trying to unmute. I think that's the thing. Oh, there she is.
Yeah. Deb, I honor you and I thank you for everything that you bring to the world. And yes, and thank you for putting the time aside and acknowledging the need for this work for yourself and for all of us and for the whole of creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Satara. I love you.
I have cockatoo hair.
Yeah.
Morning. It's cockatoo hair.
Yes, it is. Diana, I see you I feel warmed by your continued presence with us in this community. I appreciate you and thank you.
And then Diana, you may remember you get to see and acknowledge us all, and we can all express in whatever way you like, the shaking of the hands, the holding of the heart, to farewell each other from the session this morning. Diana, if you'd like to see us all off into their day and night.
I see all of you, and I heard all of you, and I thank each and every one of you for holding space for all of us, for whoever we are on this journey of grief, personal and collective. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, Diana.
Yeah, what a rich, deep, beautiful acknowledgement. Thanks so much, Diana. And just on your way, as we leave each other, I'll just call in next week. We have a really rich exploration into white privilege and racism called Whiteout. So I invite you into that conversation by Deb Collins. She's going to be facilitating the process. And we welcome you back. We'll let you know, and via email. And as Deb said, we'll follow up with the recording and everything else. Thanks so much for being with us, and may we all travel with our heart open, willing to dive, breathing deeply, and acknowledging grief in our life as part of life.